All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So first off, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. On behalf of Carolina Equality Alliance, I want to extend our thanks to both the School of Law and the university for the resources to host this discussion, as well as to Dean Baker and Professor Bryant Walker-Smith for their insight and guidance, and also to each of our panelists who have been so gracious in donating their time and their energy to us today, as well as their experiences. So as a bit of background, I'm a second year here at the School of Law, and a month from now, I will be celebrating my 8th anniversary to my husband over here. Well, okay, we'll do the applause. He is worth it. He puts up with me in law school, so at that point, I think, you know, he's worth pretty much the world to me. But back in 2013, it was a slightly different time. We had to fly across the country to get married in Seattle, Washington, because the state of South Carolina would not give us a marriage certificate. It was a year. It was a year after that Braddock's v. Haley and Condon v. Haley allowed the state to recognize our marriage under the 14th Amendment. But in that time in between, I didn't have a driver's license that matched my social security card. I couldn't buy alcohol because my debit card and my driver's license had different names. I filed single unmarried taxes in the state of South Carolina under a different name than I filed federal taxes. And I say this because today I stand here upon the foundation of the work of advocates and activists and the coalitions that they built that came before me. However, our work is not done. The rights and the protections that we have right now are fragile and young things. Condon v. Haley was only 7 years ago. Bostick was only a year ago. And even though they're founded upon the best aspirations of our society, they continue to be plagued by the effects of our nation's history. Even in the years immediately following the passage of the 14th Amendment, this aspiration of equal protection was undermined and attacked by the Supreme Court in the slaughterhouse and civil rights cases. That legacy persists today. The passage of the Equality Act languishes in the Senate. Protections for LGBTQ individuals remain scattered between states, between municipalities, between whether or not you're a federal or state employee, and even just the access to care. In our state's code of laws, we still keep the stain of anti-sodomy laws on the books 18 years after Lawrence v. Texas. We still keep on the code of laws the language that this is an abominable crime of moral turpitude. We still require invasive testimony when seeking an amended birth certificate to reflect one's gender markers. We still promulgate forms from court administration that refer to husband and wife, to mother and father. We still allow discrimination in adoption procedures. Today, not all of the effects of discrimination are as noticeable as they were back in the 60s with the Stonewall riots, but that does not change the charge that is placed upon us as students of the law and as advocates for equality to identify those issues and fight for the recognition of our shared humanity. In 1853, Theodore Parker declared, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. We must remember that only through our work today will we be able to make sure that ARC continues to bend towards justice. Our panelists tonight have a wide background and long history of involvement and engagement on these issues. Greene is the co-founder of the Transgender Awareness Alliance, which focuses on assisting transgender individuals with legal issues, such as gender marker changes, on supporting the transgender community, and on striving for equality and trans visibility through activism and speaking engagements. Vicki is the South Carolina Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Votes South Atlantic, which leverages lobbying, public support, and advocacy for access to safe and equitable healthcare services. She is a strong voice, pushing on both the state and national level for the law to protect our rights. Colleen Condon is a family court and civil rights lawyer and a family court mediator in Charleston. She and her wife, Nicole Blackley Condon, were the first same-sex couple to be granted a marriage license by the state of South Carolina. She serves on the board of Alliance for Full Acceptance as past president, and she is a member of the National LGBT Bar. She serves on the steering committees for both the Stamp Out Hate SC Coalition and SC United for Justice and Equality. Colleen also previously served as chair of the Charleston Democratic Party and served on Charleston County Council for 12 years. Finally, we would like to extend a note of thanks to Mr. Jeff Ayers, as the Executive Director of SC Equality, who regrettably could not be with us tonight, but who helped us fashion this discussion, as well as the panel, and to him we are very grateful. Please join me in welcoming these leaders of our state. So first, Ms. Condon, if you want to say some words about your experience and the issues that you're currently wrestling with, we'll jump right in.
Okay, well, so as best as I can tell, I'm back behind these chairs, but the view I have of the room, I currently see Greg and Vicky's back and William's front. So if you raise your hand, unfortunately, I won't be able to see it directly, but I know William and the CAE team will let me know as questions come up. I think this is a fabulous discussion for law students to be having. So thank you for coming up with such a wonderful topic. I think it takes a balance of being prepared to fight individual battles, to look at fighting large looming battles that affect numerous families, both through federal litigation, state litigation, and through political pressure. So I think you've come up with a wonderful topic. You know, what not everybody understands during 2014 is that it was a mix of all of those, to be quite honest. In 2014, the Braddocks v. Haley case had been filed in South Carolina already. And what may be shocking to you to realize now as law students is that there were actually two different concepts that were being addressed at that time. The Braddocks case was specifically about recognizing marriages like Williams, where people had gone to another state and gotten married, and would South Carolina recognize it? Now, Williams already done a wonderful job explaining the variety of ways it created confusion in 2014. Different last names, having to file federal taxes together, but state taxes separately. It really raised a lot of issues. So that case was already pending about recognizing marriages from other states, which is what the Braddocks family in Columbia had done. But there was really very little thought that South Carolina would grant marriage licenses. After all, it is still in the South Carolina Constitution that a marriage is only between a man and a woman, and that has not been removed. So South Carolina Equality is a wonderful statewide organization that focuses on lobbying and these large statewide efforts. And I served on the South Carolina Equality Litigation Task Force. And as part of the task force, we became aware of an earlier Bostick's case, spelled Bostics, that was in Virginia, and it came out 7 years ago last week. So 7 years ago last week, the SE Equality Task Force said, oh my gosh, Virginia is allowing the state to grant marriage licenses to same-sex couples and to recognize them. So in light of it, we knew that because we're in the same federal circuit, that law should apply, because it was a Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals decision that rules over many states, including Virginia and South Carolina. And since the Bostick's case had been determined the law of the Fourth Circuit, it therefore meant it should have been the law of South Carolina. North Carolina immediately recognized it and changed. There was definitely political outcry, but it still was done right away. It was also done right away in West Virginia. But in South Carolina, we had a strong feeling that, unfortunately, Governor then Haley and Attorney General Alan Wilson would fight us on this. So we filed suit this week, 7 years ago. We filed it in federal court. And, part of where this is actually political pressure and litigation that some of you may not know the backstory is. Just like Rosa Parks wasn't really Rosa Parks. There was another woman who actually deserves the credit for sitting in the back of the bus, but she was a young, pregnant, unmarried woman. And it wasn't considered politically savvy for her to be the plaintiff. So Rosa Parks stood up and said, I'll duplicate it. I will stand up and be that person. But, as lawyers and future lawyers in the room, I want you to know that it takes a lot of planning into how to set yourself up for the best litigation situation. So when we went and asked in October of 2014 for a marriage license, so did Professor Bert Easter and Ed Madden from Columbia. So did Ivy Hill and Misha Gibson up in Greenville, and people across the state. In Greenville, they were turned away, period. In Columbia, they were their application was received, but not the fee. So therefore, it didn't count as being received. But in Charleston, this is where political pressure actually helped grease the wheels of the case. I was currently serving on Charleston County Council and had been serving on county council from 2005 and was still serving in 2014. I ended my term in 2016 and didn't run for a fourth term. So I actually was close to the probate judge, not from my work in the courtroom. I was close to the probate judge because as county council member, we approved their budget. And so I worked with him more on management of his office, and I had a cell phone number. And so I called him and said, we're coming in. And he said, I don't even know anything about this case. I don't know what I'm going to do. And we literally then helped connect him with a fabulous lawyer. He was represented by John Nichols in the future case, who now works with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, but has a tremendous legal career in South Carolina. And he determined that it was his duty to grant us a marriage license. So we worked behind the scenes by discussing it with him. He asked us to wait another day so we could be better prepared. It therefore meant we actually set up a rally in Columbia on the State House steps on the same day as we went to the various probate offices across South Carolina, and ours was accepted. It was really an amazing and exciting day. We went through the process and then drove straight up to Columbia and all gathered and rallied on the State House steps. Unfortunately, the afternoon, later at the end of the day, we had Alan Wilson ask the state Supreme Court to not allow our marriage license to be granted. So the next day, I was up in Columbia with Melissa Burnett, one of the amazing civil rights lawyers here in the state. She and I were in Columbia trying to convince the Supreme Court to allow our marriage license to be granted, and my then fiance was in
Condon, I
Charleston
think
with
we've
one of our.
lost audio for a second. Try again.
Okay, so I was in Columbia while Nichols was in Charleston. Can you hear me well now?
Bear with us 1 second, Ms. Condon. The audio is still not coming through. Try unmuting your mic again. Let's see if that forces it.
How's that?
No.
Can you hear me?
Let me, if you will maybe leave the meeting and then come right back in, maybe that
Sure.
will fix it. I'm going to have Ms. Ringer go ahead and start on introducing herself.
Sounds wonderful.
Well, that was a compelling story that we just got cut off on, unfortunately. Those are the powers of Zoom. It is difficult for me to speak in this company and be anywhere near as compelling as Colleen or Greg or William or anybody else on this topic. Planned Parenthood probably isn't seen as a likely ally, but we are. We have long supported the rights of everyone to have access to their full reproductive care. And in fact, we are a primary provider of reproductive care to the LGBTQ community in South Carolina, including gender affirming hormone therapy. Planned Parenthood is not by nature a political organization. We're a healthcare organization that has been forced to become political because of the attacks against us. We are everyone's favorite boogeyman. We are evil. I've been called a barbarian. Legislators in committee have told me to go to hell and that I would go to hell and I would burn in hell and all those sorts of things. What is the most rewarding part about the work I do is the coalition with groups such as South Carolina United and Human Rights Commission. It has been particularly difficult lately. On all of our issues, we had an abortion ban to pass in 2021. It was like the Texas ban. It banned abortions as early as 6 weeks before people even know they're pregnant. And then right after that, we dived right into banning transgender children from playing sports in school that aligned with their gender identity. That was the most frustrating thing that I've ever had to deal with. Eventually we won. It was struck down. It's been passed in a lot of states. And they can acknowledge that it's not a problem in South Carolina, but they're trying to prevent one. Well, all the things that we are dealing with in South Carolina, I don't need to tell y'all that we rank in the bottom for all quality of life issues. The worst maternal mortality, the worst infant mortality, the lowest rate of income, the lowest rate of wages, the highest rate of uninsured people, lack of childcare, lack of health care. It is incredible. And we're not dealing with any of those issues. We're not expanding Medicaid. We're just saying that children can't play sports on the team they want. When I testified on that, I pointed out that not one person playing sports in South Carolina had been denied a trophy or a spot on a team because a transgender child also played. Thankfully, we were successful this time. I'm just not sure that we will be successful next time. What bothers me about these attacks and the attacks on reproductive care, because they're coming from the same people, is they are speaking for a minority, an extremist population that is the minority, even in South Carolina. So just as we've seen the tide turn on same-sex marriages, just in the past decade, we've seen some of our favorite politicians, Barack Obama, changed his position on that. We hope that we can change the tide on other issues affecting our own personal lives. We've got to get people in South Carolina that are us, the majority, to be the loudest people in the room. And until we start demanding that legislators respect our position, we are always going to be reactive. We need to be proactive. We need to make sure that we're voting every single time, because that's where we're going to make change. And when I hear somebody say, well, I'm just not going to bother because my vote won't make a difference. Well, I've seen way too many people win and lose based on a handful of votes. So we've got to fix that and do better. And that's the part of the coalition work that I can do. But many of our organizations are C3 only. I'm fortunate in that I represent a C3 and a C4 organization, so I can do the political work. I can lobby, and I can also help elect really good legislators. And so sometimes I get to play the bad guy for C3 organizations that can't say anything politically. It's kind of like the old Life commercials. Y'all are way too young to know those, but it's the little kid and they say, give it to Mikey, he'll eat it. He likes everything. It's give it to Vicki, she'll do it. She'll do anything. So that's kind of where we come in. And I look forward to continuing the questions and hearing more and doing more, that we can all come together and tackle our issues head on, because they are intersectional. You can't separate them.
Thank you so much. So we're going to see if the audio issue works with here. Ms. Condon, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Okay, this does appear to be an issue on my end. Here's the presenter, so I'm going to pass the mic over to Greg and bring my IT husband up here.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be here and share my bit of information. We talk about some of the work that we're currently working on and some of the issues that are currently close to the work that I'm doing. When you're helping folks get name changes and gender marker changes, you got to find the right, unfortunately, the right judges that are going to do it. There's some counties that are more accepting of changes. There's some counties that are not. South Carolina does not have a law on how to change your gender marker. So while there are definitely tons of bad laws that we have, there's no law and or protocol as to what you need. So you'll have some judges say, well, have you had any type of gender affirming surgery? That's obviously not the words that they're using right now because they're trying to block it, but that's what they mean to say. And then they want to know if you've, how many surgeries have you had, if you've had surgery, and how can you consider changing your birth certificate if you haven't had any surgeries? And well, one, that means affording surgery. Two, that means wanting surgery. And those can be interchangeable. Maybe you can't afford it, and so you feel like you don't want it. Maybe you want it and just can't afford it, right? So it's such a complex issue there. But being trans, you don't have to have any surgeries to be who you are. And so that's the issue that I want judges to understand, that I need folks to understand. The good thing about there not being a law is that when you figure out how to do certain things, because we work word of mouth, all the coalitions, it's like, hey, if you do this, if you write it like this can happen. Word spreads, things start changing. And so until anybody's ready to fight it, what's working works. So that's the benefit to that. Another major issue that has come up recently with my organization is that we had someone who lived, they were born in Texas, And so Texas obviously is no good. Not the whole state. Well, anyway, legally, Texas is no good. So Texas doesn't have a really clear path on how to change your birth certificate. This person was in the military, so they serve their country. The military, the VA identifies them as the gender that they want to identify as. Their documents were changed when they were in maybe Indiana or some other state, moved to, I think they said Virginia. Virginia acknowledged their marker change. They come to South Carolina, and guess what? They've been male on all of their documents, social security card and everything for 15 years, I think. South Carolina's like, oh, no, your birth certificate doesn't say male. So it sent them into this spiral because now they're back in therapy because South Carolina's like not acknowledging who they are and who they've been for 15 years. I've been on my journey for 10 years and I still get ma'am sometimes, usually over the phone. But I can't imagine having to change my ID back, like having to change this stuff back. That's heavy and hard. And it's hard to explain and it's just really heavy. So that right now, that's where my focus is, trying to figure out how can we get that changed. But listening to what was being said earlier, thinking about the Braddocks v. Haley, I chuckle because Braddocks, one of the Braddockses, I was at the police academy with her. So when I presented as female, we were suite mates. And so we talked about a lot of stuff. We went through and had to deal with what it was like being at the police academy at that time. And so it was really good to see where her career went and to see when she started fighting. And I think it was really cool because for me, being from South Carolina, to see someone who wasn't from here going, this isn't right. And I'm like, well, this is what we got to do. She's like, no, I'm going to sue him. And we ran into a few issues in our career that was like, hey, we should sue. You know, sometimes people just talk about it. And so when she did it, it was like right on. It was just so beautiful. One of the things that I find very ironic is that when I presented as female, my ex and I had a ceremony. It wasn't legal then. This was in, oh boy, maybe 2008, I think. Yeah, it was 2008. So we had a whole wedding, everything. You know, it just wasn't, it was, you know, legal for us because that's what people did. And when things went south with us, she filed divorce papers because at that point I had transitioned. And so she tried to divorce me. And in South Carolina, you get divorced, you know, you got to separate for like a year or something. I had to be separated. We were legally separated. And I thought, what am I supposed to do? How am I separated from someone I'm not legally married to? I don't know what's going on. It was chaos. And I called a lawyer friend and I said, what am I supposed to do? They said, absolutely nothing. They said, ride out this year. Because if they make you wait a year and they make you get a divorce, they acknowledged your wedding. So I was like, oh man, this is weird misery. Because I'm an activist, I love it. But because, you know, she wanted the house, I was like, man, what do I do? But it was such a beautiful thing. And so it was, let's see, that was in 2011. And so in 2012, I got a notice saying she dropped the file because I think somebody went, hello, this isn't going to work. And I just got a paper saying, oh, this has been dismissed. Don't worry about this. And I'm like, wait, that's not how this is supposed to work. And we were at probably 10 months. And that was in 2011, 2012. So in 2012, I was at 10 months into separation before somebody caught the red flag on that. But working with, I've worked with South Carolina United Coalition is I feel like the biggest coalition right now with so many different people working together in different parts. I also worked with Jeff at South Carolina Equality for a while. And I feel like a lot of folks who have wanted to push change and make change, a lot of times we end up in these board loops or these task force. So I was on the transaction task force and really pushing folks to understand the laws and the things that are happening for the transgender community. these issues with the kids playing sports and all these things, it's always heartbreaking to know folks want to mess with what our kids are doing. As a trans man, it's also heartbreaking that the reality is this issue is so misogynistic that they're not even paying attention to trans men in sports. They're not paying attention to us. We are a very invisible people. And it's so heartbreaking because the whole argument tends to be this person who was assigned male at birth is going to be too strong to play on the women's team. No one's talking about the trans guys who, you know, are trying or not trying. Or I know like there's a trans wrestler who they denied him to be on the men's team. And so he like won the championship on the women's team and people were upset. So it's like, you know, the reasons for it are so wrong. And it seems like it's just so many people, it's like, it's logical, but then when you got these 10 people who have sprinkled this hate across the country, and it just makes it so difficult. Yeah, but when it comes to like different work and different things doing, like we could do, like Vicki said, there are some folks who can do the political push aspect. You can still do it in the background as far as your own personal votes and making sure you're paying attention to who you want to put back in the seat, or even paying attention or making the time, if you have it, to even run yourself, you know, run for something. That's always, you know, that's a lot, but you get the right folks behind you. That's something that's also very doable. So I think about advocacy in so many different ways. It's not always going to be in your face. There's a lot of folks who work in the background, who are doing changes, who are making changes. And whether it's volunteering somewhere, donating somewhere, like whatever folks do, it's there's a lot of work that can be done. It doesn't have to be so out if that's like the issue or whatnot. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. We're going to hope that the third time is the charm here, and bring Ms. Condon in. Can you hear us, Ms. Condon? Your audio on your phone is muted, I believe.
Let me turn it off there. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We have lift.
Oh, yay. Okay, sorry. I had a great connection here, but sorry. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge terrific teammates, Vicki and Greg. You know, it does take a team of us working together. And I am so glad that you law students will be joining us in this fight. Planned Parenthood is providing more hormone therapy than any other single provider across the state of South Carolina. Thank you, Planned Parenthood, for making that gender affirming treatment available. And Greg is one of the amazing leaders and speakers across the state on trans issues. They've mentioned SC United. So there's two coalitions that are very active this year in our community. SC United for Justice and Equality is specifically groups that are dealing with issues for our trans community, lesbian and gay community, for any part of our community. And it is a wonderful opportunity for us to work together. There are over 50 organizations that participate. I participate on the steering committee, and this year we successfully fought back a trans sports ban at 6 different committee hearings this year. It took a lot of work, all of us together, and we can certainly use you law students helping us as we're fighting those issues moving forward. There also is Stamp Out Hate South Carolina Coalition. With Stamp Out Hate Coalition, again, it has only been formed in the last couple of years, but the first SC United is really focused on the LGBT community and people who are involved and supportive, but it does include organizations like Planned Parenthood and ACLU that have a broader focus, but this is one of their focuses. Stamp Out Hate South Carolina is specifically to get a hate crime bill passed in South Carolina. We successfully passed it through the state house this year, and we're hoping we can get it passed through the state senate in 2022. So we absolutely will have events going on. And so you can go to the Stamp Out Hate South Carolina page and SC United for Justice page and sign up to keep in touch with both coalitions. It definitely takes a lot of people at the table and a lot of thoughts, because the same method might work in one bill, but it doesn't work the next time. It may work in the state house, but not in the state senate. So it takes a lot of different avenues. Now, I'm going to follow up what Greg was talking about, gender confirmation. My firm got asked to help somebody out about 6 years ago, and since then, we have been doing legal transitions for people across the state of South Carolina. We've done over 250 gender confirmations and name changes in counties across South Carolina. And I want to give you an explanation of how there's kind of that discourse advocacy methodology, because as Greg pointed out, there is no law that says you can change your gender on your driver's license if ... So we've had to come up with a lot of creative things, and there certainly were pioneers who started the effort. But we have now, in my firm, Condon Family Law and Mediation, have established a close relationship with the attorneys at DHEC. Now, every time we sue for a gender confirmation and we think a judge may not be receptive, we sue DHEC, and DHEC now specifically agrees with us. Greg and others use a letter that we got several years ago where DHEC conceded that if you can prove treatment such that a doctor believes that they have changed gender to their affirming gender, that is enough to get a driver's license and birth certificate changed in South Carolina. Now, I can tell you, we brought groups to the hearings back several years ago to ask them to change the regulations and allow there to be a regulation that specifically would set this forth. But this is where political pressure is very overwhelming. Unfortunately, Governor McMaster has made it very clear he has no desire for his DHEC to make it easier to confirm your gender. So instead of changing the regulations, which we try to do, are unsuccessful, we could arguably try to appeal a denial of gender confirmation, but unfortunately, I'm not sure we have the votes to support it on the South Carolina Court of Appeals or the South Carolina Supreme Court. So that is why we've instead sat down face to face with DHEC lawyers and said, okay, if someone has surgery, is that enough? If they have top surgery, is that enough? If they have laser facial hair removal, is that enough? If they have taken hormone therapy for 6 months, is that enough? And we've brought in medical doctors from across the state and actually across the Southeast to testify and explain how when someone takes hormones, it creates male pattern baldness. It creates a redistribution of fat and muscles across the body. The voice deepens. There are certainly body changes in the genitals as well, and it creates a reframing of the chest. So we've brought in doctors who specifically testify and people who made videos of themselves throughout getting T or other hormone therapy to show how changes occur. And we found that using a cooperative legal style has allowed us to get success. But as Greg pointed out, it's very judge specific and we can't choose a judge. For example, I have a hearing tomorrow in Berkeley County. We thought we had one particular judge, and so we were all ready to help somebody who's a very open and loud member of our community get her transition tomorrow. Unfortunately, the judge has changed, and the judge that we have tomorrow, we know does not believe you can ever change a gender, ever in South Carolina. Now, luckily, he's about to retire. But it means that we have to do it over and over again and be diligent litigants. And so tomorrow I'm going in to just change her legal name, at least on documents, not only for herself, but for her children, so that it properly identifies her on their birth certificates and all of their legal documents. And we're going to keep doing that until we think that there's either a Supreme Court decision or a change in the political power of South Carolina that we can actually change the laws. a lot of times, Greg mentioned other states, a lot of times we ask them where their birth certificate came from. And if their birth certificate is from a more liberal state, we urge them to go follow their rules and go through their process for a gender change. So there's a lot of different therapy, strategic ways to approach this. We talked about marriage equality, but I want to talk about parental equality. South Carolina Equality also participated, and I served on the team for a lawsuit that made sure that a second mother gets to be listed on a birth certificate without having to go through an adoption process. And so we pushed that through the appeals process in federal court, and Judge Lewis supported that. But I do full-time family court work. Some of it specifically in the LGBT arena, a lot of it's not. But, we're still seeing problems in 2021. My client, before she hired me, walked into a courtroom, and because of the win of the Carson v. Heigl case, as the spouse of the birth mother, she was listed on the birth certificate also. But DHEC, unfortunately, still use an old software program and old paper forms that say father and mother. So the only way to list a second mother was to list the second mother as a father. Well, until she hired me, she had 2 judges say that she had committed fraud by having her name in the father field, because she clearly wasn't the father, and that she must have been trying to defraud her insurance company and all sorts of people and the court system. So I had to go in and point out that while we had already won this victory back in 2016 with Carson v. Heigl, we now had to go forward and specifically push it forward for this family, because judges didn't understand that was the only way a second mother could be recognized on a birth certificate. So it really takes political pressure sometimes, takes legal savvy sometimes, and sometimes it just takes legal doggedness and appealing a case. And all of those are valuable skills you're being trained to do while you're in law school. So I think all of those are very important as we're moving the ball forward with LGBT plus rights in South Carolina. And I participate regularly in creating change and in the National LGBT Bar Conference called Lavender Law, so that I can hear what's worked in other states and see if we can adopt it here in South Carolina, because it is something that we learn a lot from more progressive states. I would urge all of you to look at joining the National LGBT Bar as a law student. There is a conference that's specifically held in the fall. It's already been held this year, but they have job fairs as well as opportunities to get to know attorneys across the country who are doing this work and who can facilitate you working in this area.
So just before we go into questions, Ms. Condon, we had a student who states that she is beside herself wanting to know about the rest of your story before we were cut initially. So you had been talking about the Attorney General filing suit once you had gone to the probate.
Absolutely. So, part of this part of the story is what I think most people don't know about, is that it really helped that I knew the probate judge. And while, believe me, I can be a bulldog in court as I need to be, it's better to be a smart lawyer than a tough lawyer, because sometimes tough doesn't work. Sometimes you'll be just pushing that that rock uphill. For example, the Columbia couple had gone in front of the probate judge in Richland County numerous times. The couple who tried to get their marriage license accepted in Greenville had been numerous times. But by me sitting down and explaining the law as I understood it to the probate judge, he was receptive when we walked in. He is a distant cousin of mine, but that had nothing to do with it. He has the last name Condon. He's like a third cousin. In Charleston, we don't celebrate holidays together or anything. We wave on the street. So people think it mattered that he was a Condon. No, what mattered is that we had a personal relationship, because I was an elected official and I was determined I was going to push it forward. So we were literally in multiple courts, and our amazing team of Necki Shutt and Melissa Burnett and Susan Dunn and Tom Greshett and Greg Adams, and a former professor of USC law, all were our legal team that helped push this forward into federal court. And our federal court case was resolved in less than 5 weeks, which is unheard of. The Braddocks, unfortunately, Tracy and her wife had been waiting for over a year and a half, and their judge was still hesitating to make a decision while ours was decided, and then their judge decided the next day and followed the situation. So it was a crazy time. We were very active, and doing that and having that help from so many amazing lawyers made me committed and really refocus my practice to include civil rights work. So we go across the state to deal with common law marriage issues. I mean, literally just this week, I'm dealing with a case where a couple that got a domestic partnership in Washington State in 2007, but then didn't get married until it was legal in Washington State until 2013, excuse me. There's a question of whether there were marital rights that are established through the domestic partnership. So we're constantly refacing issues, even when we win the battle. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to still use those smarts or that assertiveness to win the specific battle for a family, even after we win it for all of us as a group. And we need people like you who are ready to come in and think creatively and think intelligently and fight diligently, both in the courtroom and in negotiation and in the political arena, to continue making real change for our community.
First off, to all three of you, thank you so much for your insight, your stories, your experience, as well as your historical work and ongoing work. Before I open up the floor to some questions, I wanted to touch on a couple of things, which is that it seems to me, since we operate within a framework that is very recalcitrant to change, that in a southern state, there is a political facet that requires what feels like creative legal frameworks. Before marital equality, we would have adult adoptions, for example. And so I'm curious what resources would be assistive or helpful, such as a bar publication about the process for a gender marker change, or CLEs at like the South Carolina Association of Justice that can push that conversation to in front of maybe members of the judiciary, or at least to other litigators as they're trying to assist their own clients navigating these thorny issues before we have an actual statutory framework to operate under. And it's kind of a question to all three of you.
One of the things I would say that would worry me about, especially on the gender marker side of things, that if it's put in front of folks who disagree with it, then maybe instead of finding something to help us establish it would push something that says it can't be done. So, but that's my fear as someone who, my law experience is law enforcement, so not, practicing law, which is an odd thing in itself.
I absolutely agree, Greg. Now, we keep a spreadsheet of all the cases we've had and which judges are supportive and which ones aren't, and which one required this much evidence versus that much evidence for gender confirmations. And so we will discuss it, but we discuss it a little less honestly if it's going in a public document. So indeed, we are preparing part of the book that will be released early next year about LGBT legal rights in South Carolina. but that book will have a little bit. And, you know, honestly, on some of our subversive ways we've gotten things passed, we share that more word of mouth. Anybody is welcome to call my law firm, Condon Family Law and Mediation in Charleston. Talk to myself or my law partner, Lauren Edwards, and we will be glad to share documents with other lawyers. We're glad to share insight of the experiences we've had in various judges, in front of various judges across the state. But we're not going to put it in a recorded CLE that's going to be shared, because we're going to have an experience like one I'll tell you about. An upstate judge who is extremely conservative happened to be in a Charleston courtroom, because they do rotate around to, quote, create fairness. And this upstate judge, who shall remain nameless on this recording, came in, and we were prepared, and we thought we were going to have a good shot at getting this forward. And we started presenting the facts on the case, and Judge Fraley, whoops, I said his name. Judge Fraley called me up to the stand and said, "Miss Condon, are you really trying to make that little girl, me believe that little girl is a guy?" And it was a 17-year-old. I don't know what's in its pants. I was horrified, and I respectfully looked at the judge and said, "Judge, I don't know what's in your pants, but you're presenting as a male wearing a tie. Would it be right to use male pronouns with you, Judge Fraley?" It didn't work. He did allow a name change. He didn't allow a gender change. But we tried. We had another upstate judge who said, "You people in Charleston think you make your own laws." Well, I try making laws all across the state of South Carolina, but I'm for Charleston. She went and lambasted the local judges who had been granting them. So there's definitely some reasons we don't necessarily point out where our successes are, because otherwise those judges might not get reappointed. This second judge literally threatened one of our local judges and said, "I'm going to tell the Judicial Commission that you're doing crazy things down in Charleston." So we have to always kind of figure out how to do it. And that's where, you know, we all kind of figure out what roles we can do, as Vicki mentioned. You know, in which avenue can we push and get the most done. And it takes a lot of discussion and teamwork, but no, we're all a team together. So as you join the South Carolina Bar, you know, later this year or in future years, know that there's a team of people out there, both lawyers and others, who are ready to team up with you and figure out how we can get equality and equity for our community.
And Ms. Ringer, I know you touched on this earlier. You know, because of your organization, you get to engage in political discourse as well through the C4 nature. And that was something that when I was preparing for this panel, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Ayers both discussed as well, which is that balancing of building a coalition and navigating what may be at times competing interests, you know, to bring someone on board who may disagree with you on another position, and how you navigate that process to, you know, to identify, this is a topic that I think is right for change right now, but it's also going to mean that we have to push back another topic, you know, to a later date. And so I'm wondering how you balance those issues.
Well, that's interesting, because I was on a Zoom earlier today, and it was precisely this issue with a Representative London Lamar from Tennessee and a Representative Attica Scott from Kentucky. So two women that definitely know how to balance competing issues. What I have found by and large is that you've got to be willing to work behind the scenes. We have some, and I'm just going to say it, and I'm going to be political here, as Republicans who just are going to be nasty in public. They're going to be against same-sex marriage, against transgender people, against abortion, reproductive rights, everything that we care about, they're going to be against publicly. But sometimes you can work with them behind the scenes. And like Colleen said, where we have victories, I don't call those people out because I don't want them to get in trouble and lose elections with their base. But we do have Republicans who vote against these things, who work really great behind the scenes, and especially on the transgender sports ban, where it took a majority of Republicans to beat that down because they hold the majority on all legislative committees. And that took them finding a way to save face with Republicans, but to beat it down. So we've got to give them ways that they can save face, stay strong with their partners and their voters and their fellow colleagues in the state house, but be able to beat down what they know personally is bad policy. And some other bills I just want to point out that we're going to be facing in the coming year session. We're in year 2 of 2-year legislation. Denying medical care to transgender children, that bill, and it has 2 Democrats that have signed on to sponsor it, which is just beyond measure to me. One who even went on Fox News to defend his position. But that would deny transgender minors from being able to get surgery, hormone therapy, and counseling, regardless of if they have parental consent or not. That just defies all logic. And another one we're dealing with that a lot of people saw as, oh, well, that just makes kind of sense, is a religious exemptions bill, which allows all medical providers, staff, nurses, doctors, receptionists to refuse to treat anyone with whom they disagree with for religious reasons. So I could be a lesbian and they decide that they disagree with that, that's evil, and could deny to set a bone. I've broken a bone. It's not just denying treatment that they think is related to my gayness, but that anything, any medical care they can deny. And of course, a lot of that is their primary purpose was to allow all people to be able to opt out of performing abortions, but there's already federal law that allows that. So this is going way beyond what we expected. And when I testified on this, the senator who was the primary sponsor wanted to challenge me on it. And he kept saying, I think you're misunderstanding this. I said, sir, have you read your own bill? It will allow anyone's, regardless of what religion it is, to be able to refuse to provide care to somebody. That's just unacceptable. And if you don't want to provide care to somebody, don't go in the medical field. It's pretty simple. But those are the things. And when I first came to South Carolina, there were a couple of people, I mean, not to South Carolina, but to Planned Parenthood. I've been in South Carolina forever, as you can tell from this accent. They told me, you got to get to know Colleen. You got to get to know Susan Dunn at ACLU. And you've got to get to know Melissa and Necki, attorneys at Burnett Shutt Law. Melissa, while defending the marriage case, she is now our attorney on the abortion ban case. So we are all one great big happy family, and you can't separate us and our issues. And on many things, there are coalition partners who for fundraising purposes. They have donors who don't like them to mention abortion. Will work with us behind the scenes with their contacts. They're just not going to come out and testify at a committee. So take people where they are. Don't beat them down for not being where we are, but bring them slowly along, because we are all learning. This is hard work, but it's worth it.
I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to any questions from here and in chat. So let me grab a mic, that would be helpful. Oh, swell. So who wants to take those series of questions? Thank you. That was both of those were great questions.
Colleen, as an attorney, is probably the best one to speak on this. But what I will say is that there are a number of ways for law students and attorneys to get involved with our issues. In South Carolina, anyone under the age of 17 has to have parental consent for an abortion. There is an opt-out of that where minors can get a judicial bypass to allow a judge to allow a minor to get an abortion without parental consent. And obviously there's a lot of reasons for that. And so it requires an attorney to file paperwork and to represent minors on that. And we've been able to recruit a few attorneys, and we don't deal with it a lot, but that's a wonderful way for students to get their feet wet and work with some of the volunteers, because it's all done pro bono. I know that's not what you want to hear, is that you got to do it pro bono, but unfortunately there's not a lot of money in the work that we do. And then of course because of the fight to preserve our rights, we have to sue everybody all the time. So we have just created a position for a chief counsel in our affiliate. Planned Parenthood National has a bevy of attorneys on staff full-time, and they're awesome. And I don't know what we do without them, but we're hiring a general counsel here in our affiliate, which covers South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. And the wonderful thing about the pandemic, if you can find something good about it, is that they have finally discovered that that person doesn't have to work in Raleigh, our headquarters office, to be effective. We can all work wherever we want to, and it's a good thing. So just those are some of the ways in which students can get involved, or lawyers can get involved. And of course, all of our jobs, because we want the diversity, lived experiences tell the story in the work that we're providing. The person who is the director of our gender affirming hormone therapy needs to be able to understand that issue. Me as a white woman can't tell our BIPOC patients what they need or what they should expect. So we need all of those voices to really elevate our issues. And we're trying to center those voices in all the work we do. So come apply every job.
And so Ms. Condon in chat identified SouthCarolinaUnited.org, as well as StampOutHate.sc as two of the websites for the advocacy and coalition groups mentioned earlier.
So those are great ways to get involved now as a law student. There will be absolutely activities that you will get to be known to groups across the state, and which I can tell you, if the lawyer is supportive, they're supportive of the LGBT community, they are part of one or more of those organizations, and you will get to know them. What is surprising to some folks is big firms oftentimes have a diversity and inclusion committee. So know that while in the past there was a thought that would the big firms hire people who are queer, I'll tell you, actually, some of those big firms specifically are. Also, reach out to lawyers who you admire and in a region of the state you might want to practice in. I will tell you, if you give me an area of the state you want to head to, I'm going to post my email address. Know that I am always glad to have a cup of coffee with any one of y'all, or set up a Zoom call one-on-one and recommend people who may be willing to work with you. But, you know, there are amazing organizations like Planned Parenthood who have an attorney. I don't know any of the queer organizations in South Carolina that specifically have an attorney, but when we filed some of these big suits, we filed them with Lambda Legal, who has an office in Atlanta. And most of this work is done in federal court. So they actually will hire a person with a South Carolina license, even though the job's in Atlanta, because most of the work is federal work. We also work closely with National Center for Lesbian Rights, NCLR, on some of these big matters. Gosh, I'm even trying to think. There's so many different organizations out there. ACLU is hiring, actually, right now for some staff members. So know that there are always someone out there. It may not be as easy to find as some other areas of the law, but there are lots of ways for you to get to know lawyers who are receptive. And while we do a lot of family court work, Burnett Shedd, who's been mentioned already, does tremendous work in discrimination matters and employment discrimination and other regards. So they're a wonderful law firm in Columbia. There aren't necessarily a large percentage of lawyers and law firms that are openly gay and work on openly gay and queer issues, but there are a few. And we would love to get to know you as law students as you're looking for summer internships and jobs after graduation.
And I'll off on that point as well, though I'm biased as a lawyer over there. Working with Vicki and Melissa Burnett, I started that entirely because of Condon v. Haley and Braddock v. Haley. Both Melissa and Vicki are fantastic resources, even just to grab lunch with and just say, hey, we have these, we have this interest, point us in a direction. Because both of them are so experienced in building coalitions to attack these different issues across the state. They somehow know everyone. It's a little terrifying. And they're both so kind and generous with their time and their experience.
I definitely agree with that. I've met them both. Melissa was actually a mediator when I sued the police department that fired me after transitioning. So definitely great folks to be around. And another way that you can help is not just the coalition aspect. That's really big because there's always things coming up through the coalitions, but paying attention to the grassroots works that's happening. Because sometimes you may have a few, a very small organization. It's like, we want to push this issue, but we need more voices. We need some help. And so it's like crowdfunding, right? If you get a bunch of people to give $1 versus one person giving this, you can get more, right? So it's kind of like crowdfunding justice. Like, hey, we need voices at the State House on Saturday. Can we just get some bodies there, have a sign up that says honk your horn for whatever, and if you're down, it's going to make a difference. Those are the type of things that if you have the time to give and you're not sure which direction necessarily to go, there are grassroots organizations around the state and around Columbia that are already doing stuff. They know what needs to be done. They just need a hand. And so that's another way. And for me, as someone who started a grassroots organization, that's why I think the coalition is so important. That's why I really like the SC Coalition, because when there's an issue, I get an email, and I get it actually on like 4 different emails, but it allows me different ways to share that information. I can easily jump on Facebook and hit up some people like, hey, you have time to come do this? We need some more people. Something as simple as Pride's this weekend. That's something really simple. So how, if you wanted to say walk in the Pride parade, but not, you don't have a permit yet, or because it's already passed due, whatever, but there are organizations out there that could definitely use more people in their section of the parade, right? So even something that simple makes a difference when people come out and see like, oh, what's going on down here? Like, wow, the parade is getting longer. There are more people here. What's going on? And then you get to put, I think you said the Humanist Association, you get to put that on a banner and say, we support whatever, right? And so now people are like, oh, what's that association? What are you doing? Now you've got this group of people that are like, hey, we think like you think, we want to see what you're doing. How can we help you, right? So that's like, to me, the feeding point of coalitions. Like, you get to feed and bounce ideas off of each other. I'm not in a position of hiring anyone right now, so can't help you on that second part.
One thing I'll jump on that Greg has said is that we've got to support these organizations with your time and your money. South Carolina does not have a long history of strong grassroots organizations that are able to make it on money. We've seen way too many have to shut down because they don't get the financial support. So give your time and your treasures and time to those organizations. And the more voices that we have doing that work, I can remember when I first started working with Planned Parenthood, I think South Carolina Equality was the only organization I was aware of supporting these issues. And now y'all have heard of all the different ones doing this work, and that's amazing. And we're spreading the word, and it's becoming far more acceptable, cool for everybody to get involved, regardless of your own personal identity or orientation. If we're going to stand up for people's rights, we're going to stand up for everybody's rights. The hardest thing for me is that there are people still who would deny anyone their basic essence of who they are and what they are and who they love. It boggles the brain. And I'm a South Carolina girl from the country. So if I can see beyond my raisings, and thankfully I had a very progressive mother. So, but my influences in South Carolina and growing up Southern Baptist, God help me. And if I can move beyond that, anybody can. So another thing that I would encourage you all to do is go to the State House, participate in committee meetings, try it out, sit for those battles like the transgender sports bill, the medical refusals bill when it comes up. They're going to introduce a Texas bounty hunter abortion bill this coming session. So show up to those committees, listen, watch how they work. It helps to fill the room because it tells legislators they're being watched. And that can be the best power that you can have, just filling the room. And then as you get more comfortable, testify. You don't have to testify as a lawyer, testify as a person. But there are a bunch of attorneys on those committees. Attorneys seem to be the primary. You're either attorney or retired to be a legislator, because few other people can afford to do it. It's, 6 months of the year, you've got to be in Columbia 3 days a week. Most people working hourly jobs obviously couldn't do that. So show up at the State House, be seen.
Do we have any other questions from folks? Yes, Dean Baker.
Thank you. Just want to make sure the people on Zoom could hear. First, thank you all very, very much for coming and for joining us tonight. This has been wonderful. I just wanted to ask the question about, since this talk was about activism and advocacy, for all three of you have talked about your lived experiences, and your advocacy in some way has been impacted by your own experience. And how do you separate that when you need to be both the advocate and the one who is being advocated for? So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that from your experiences and the lawsuits you've been involved in and the work you've done. And thank you all again.
Well, I will tell you, Neki Shutt could write a good book about dealing with Colleen as a plaintiff versus dealing with Colleen as a lawyer. It is a challenge. That's a very good question. I ended up being an extremely good plaintiff because I was already used to dealing with the press. I was already used to dealing with the courtroom. But it was hard. It took it very personally. That night, after we came back from the rally in Columbia, there were flowers on our front porch and a card. But I told my wife to stay in the car for me to go check it out, because I'll tell you, I was afraid. Could it be a bomb? Could it be dog poo? I will tell you, if you're sensitive, don't read comments on a Post and Courier or State article about our issues. Even if the article can be supportive, and then there'll be 1,000 comments below talking about that damn fat dyke and why don't we kill her. You can't read those unless you've got a really strong constitution. It's once I fought and was involved in myself, it's made it it's easier for me to explain to others why I need them to be plaintiffs, why then I need them to be witnesses in political hearings. We need strong voices. We need a variety of voices, because your story may be the one that convinces the state senator to vote for the hate crime bill. As Vicki said, there are absolutely supportive allies who were making things happen behind the scenes on the transports ban bill and on hate crime, who you haven't heard their names, but we know behind the scenes how much work they did. And it really does take a little bit of all of us to get things done. And then there was one other question about the inner fire and outward civility. And it's a question I see online. How do you balance the inner fire you need to fight, from Lydia Hendricks, and the outward civility? It takes both. In the practice law, you need both skills. You need to be able to figure out when you can settle a case. You need to be able to figure out when you're going into a courtroom. I mean, I tell clients all the time, I love going to trial. They, as the plaintiff or the defendant, will not like going to trial. It is their life. I literally go into family court and, talking about people's sex lives. I mean, it can be all sorts of uncomfortable topics. But as a lawyer, I'm in there having fun. I'm getting to have my To Kill a Mockingbird, my Law and Order moment, pound on the desk if you can't handle the truth. I love being that litigator. I love the success of it, but I also know that the significant amount of my work is based on reaching successful negotiations and finding allies in ways that are a lot quieter than that. So it takes, I think, both skills to do most areas of law, including advocacy in this area.
I'd like to actually start with the idea of not reading comments. So when I was going through my lawsuit, apparently there was a hate page that was created. And my attorney actually messaged me and said, I want you to know this page exists and I don't want you to read it. So I read it. And it was mind-blowing, life-changing to know that there were that many people who had no idea of who I was, had so much opinion about me. One of the things that came up during my suit was getting a new bulletproof vest. And so if they actually read the article, and you could tell which comments did, they were like, well, you don't need what do you need a vest for? You just need to be shot. And it's like, okay. And for a while, I was more afraid as a former police officer than I was every day going to work. And not that you should be afraid every day of going to work, but the reality of the job, you still have to have that inner system check of what the job is. And so once I kind of got past that with therapy, finding supportive friends, and a lot of times you hear folks say you get to choose your family. That's when I started choosing folks that I needed support, because it was just such a dark time for me. It's hard to get through that. For me, once I got through that though, it didn't matter what people said to me. I had to really dig deep into some of my own personal strengths that I know exist. As a 22nd Black female to graduate from the Citadel, like that's heavy, that means a lot. So I had to really say, hey, you can get through this. This is what's going to happen. You knew this was going to happen. You know, you have the conversation with your lawyer. Yeah, this could get rough. This could get bad. And then it does. And you're like, oh, okay, I wasn't really ready. But at the same time, I was dealing with that. I was battling how my family was accepting me and all of those things. And my thought as I really got deeper into advocacy work was, I don't want anyone to have to deal with it the way I dealt with it. And that's been my main, my main thing is, I feel like there's like two types of folks. Like I had to do all of this to get it. You can figure it out. And then I had to do all this to get it. I don't want you to have to work that hard. And that's the direction I went. I don't want folks to have to do and go through the same things that I went through. So that's what pushed me to be an advocate. And so it does get difficult at times to advocate for myself. And sometimes I don't know when I need to be doing that. And so that's why I try to reach out to my support system and to other folks, even on my board, and say, is everything good? Did I do good? Did I sing, whatever? Because it makes a difference when you can have someone who knows you say, hey, you looked really uncomfortable, but that's because I know you. My wife is good with that. She goes, I could tell you were not comfortable, but there's no one else in the room who would have known. Like, so those are things that, when you're looking for support systems, folks that'll, not yes men, not yes folks, but folks that'll say, you kind of messed that up, or you did whatever, and they can help you to deal with where the mess up was. And oftentimes those folks also know what your triggers are. So when you're doing something, or when you're trying to advocate for someone or yourself, and someone says a certain thing, people who know like, oh, I know that's his button. So, like if they're out in the crowd and they know, they can jump in and say, hey, by the way, and then change the subject. So that kind of thing is tough. We've been talking about going to different hearings. You mentioned, going to hearings and things like that. When we had the bathroom bill, I feel like that was a huge push with coalition work in South Carolina. Like the bathroom bill brought people together. I had people messaging me I didn't know and say, hey, I know you're doing some work. We need you to go to the State House and do this. And I was like, me? Okay. But it really pushed me. And one of the things that I remember saying to, I don't remember whoever made the bill. But the bill is, again, bright. Really bright. It's always, again, it's such a focus on trans women and the idea of what bathroom folks are going in. And then there's this piece of, well, I don't want my child to walk in the bathroom and see this, and I don't want my child, like there's always this correlation between our community and children when we're really not the predators. Anyways, and so I took the focus off of that, and I was a little bit neater and nice suit and all that. I looked at Senator Bright and I said, so what you're telling me is you want me in the bathroom with your wife? And I said it just like that. Made him hella uncomfortable. I mean, his face turned so red, and it was just like, thanks, I'm done. And, you know, it was, like you said, you don't know if what you say is what makes a difference. And I don't know if it did or didn't, you know what I'm saying? But I know that it made him think. You're trying to present this way, and it made him think like, oh, wait, there's more to this. Wait a minute, you know? And so those are like where voices can come in handy. But having the support behind you helps you to be able to say those bold things and be that bold person when the time comes. And sometimes I have no idea how I do it. I try to just do it and, you know, debrief about it later.
I just have to throw this in because he mentioned the bathroom bill. In our administrative office in Columbia, we have a bathroom labeled men, one labeled women. What we did during the bathroom bill, and it's still there today, we have a sign on one of them that says Lee Bright's potty, and on the other one it says everyone else. A little bit of humor, but go back to your question. I think that passion for the work that you're doing is critical, whether it's for yourself or for somebody you know and love and want to support. I don't do this job for the money because nonprofits are notoriously underpay their staff. Not all of them, but most of them. But for me, it has become, and it may be my station in life. It's a mission for me. So I bring my passion to my work every day. And it is hard for me to curb what I say. I'm a mouthy person. And my mother used to always tell me my mouth was going to get me in trouble, and it really has. I don't tolerate a lot of ignorance anymore, and I'll just flat out say it. But you do have to learn how to work with people that you just don't like, and sometimes that's hard for me. But to help people find a way out, the transgender sports bill, for some people, they could say, you know, I hate what's happening to our kids. But when you talk to them about the economics of the NCAA pulling tournaments because of discrimination, that had an impact on some legislators. The South Carolina High School League executive director saying, this is not an issue in our schools. That was impactful with others. And just talking about kids being themselves and their acceptance among other kids, that had a huge impact on others. So find your work, find your niche, and as they say, do what you love and the money will follow. I believe that because you'll make things happen for yourself, and you'll find the way to speak for yourself, speak for your clients, and make a great living doing it.
Do we have any other questions that anyone like to raise to the panelists this evening? I'm gonna just ask a final one, and then I won't keep everyone here. And that is to jump a little bit off of what Greg discussed. How do you, while navigating advocacy and activism, you place yourself into a discourse that is very heated and emotional at times? And how do you, create a support system to safeguard your own emotional well-being while you're carrying that burden and that charge? Because, on these issues, we don't always win. Our clients are not always successful, and that's frustrating. And I just wonder how each of you navigate that process, you know, with your own support structure.
When it comes to emotional support systems, I'm a huge advocate for therapy. I think everyone should have a therapist. That's just my opinion. It's good to have friends you can talk to and vent to, but it's good to have a therapist who can help you through your thoughts and not just listen to you, right? Because they listen in addition to kind of giving you guidance with your thoughts. So I'm a huge advocate for therapy. So that's kind of when it comes to emotions, that's me. And I try to pay attention to my emotions, but therapy has taught me to do that. So when something happens and I get upset, what do I start doing when I'm mad? Or what do I start doing when I get anxious? And I started learning how much I do like fidgety things. I'm like, okay, things like that. So my actions sometimes let me know what I'm feeling before I realize what I'm feeling, if that makes sense. But like I said, for me, therapy has taught me how to pick that up and learn that about myself, and taking the time to learn that about myself is emotional, is self-care for your own emotional support, is learning that about yourself.
I will tell you that this passion work, working for our community, working on issues that change not just for one family, but change laws across South Carolina for many families, it's just really very moving work. I will tell you, I do a lot of divorces and custodies and adoptions with families that don't have a gay person in the mix. And those pay the bills, but this is my heart work, where I feel like I can make a real difference in people's lives. So it provides so much benefit. I'm glad to be able to do this work, and it really heals me in a lot of ways. But certainly there are times I hit stressful situations, and you know what, between my wife and my coworkers, they're in a good position to say, Colleen, time to take some time off. It's been a really hard day. Take some time off. So it's something you just figure out how to balance it, just like you have to balance any stress in your life.
I don't know that I could expand on that much, but I'll say that for all of us, no matter what work you do, you all need a safe place to land. And whether that's your partner, your best friend, a parent, a child, the person who loves you regardless of what you're doing and how stupid you can be in person. And that for me has been my husband. He thinks I'm brilliant no matter what stupid things I say. So you all need that. Find your tribe, because doing coalition work especially really helps you feel like you're not alone when they're pushing these harmful bills that won't do a damn thing to make our state better. I'm just in a permanent state of angry and frustrated. And so I have to scream, and sometimes I have to drink to forget it. I'm not encouraging alcoholism, but find your activity. I probably need to look into therapy more than drinking, but I'm almost afraid to find out what a therapist would open up about me. So, but you all know what you love. If it's going in for a run, or just talking to friends, or hanging out with your dog, or some of us, it's just do what grounds you. I'm not one on meditation, and we do all these healing activities on Zoom that just make me so uncomfortable. You know, I'd rather just gather with friends and have a glass of wine than do this meditation and whatever. I am always just so embarrassed by that. But find what works for you. We all have our own thing.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming out tonight. To each of the panelists, thank you so much for your time and energy. If we could give them a round of applause. So with that, on behalf of Carolina Equality Alliance and the School of Law, thank you so much again. After tonight, remember that to have courage in your convictions and to not go gently into the night, because we must continue the fight wherever it leads us. We have great resources here at the School of Law. We have wonderful mentors in the bar and in the community at large. So please do not hesitate to reach out to them. And we look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Condon.